Okay, someone had joined. Okay, Ritvik is here. Yeah, hi Ritvik. Yeah, we were waiting for you and we will get started now. It's a bit late, then the 5 minutes already late, so I'll try to make it up. Yeah, third session today. Hi. Mm, Hope you all are doing fine. So this is the agenda that we're gonna cover. We will talk about the OOPS principle. I know for some of them who has already spent good amount of time on a Java, it would be too obvious and too easy. But I don't wanted to dive into the framework kind of a thing and design pattern without even touching base with the OOPS. So I'm thinking to spend not more but at least 10-15 minutes on OOP concept, and then we will actually talk about design pattern, what are all design patterns we should know as an test engineer, and then we will specifically talk about the page object pattern because it's something that most of the people use and it solves like very important problem that people face, and then we will actually hand code it, right? So we will take any example. So I'm not sure whether we would be able to complete that demo part, implementation part, but I would really love to do it. It's like whatever we have covered in these 2-3 sessions, we will try to implement all this together, and you can give me any website or we can choose a website that is available for testing, and we will try to write down how page object model should evolve, how framework should evolve, how the single script, just like what we could have recorded like this, that we have created, how can those tests would we evolve, and we will have the framework in place uh, to tackle all the challenges and having like reporting, handling multiple environments, using particular tags to execute. So all those features we would explore that, right? And those are like typical features of a framework and nothing related to the Playwright. But sooner, once we do this kind of a thing, we will see how to use a same state instead of doing login, right? So Playwright supports an inbuilt way using a storage state where we don't even have to do the login 10 to 20 different times, right? So in our Selenium scripts, we start each script by logging into the application if our application is behind the authentication, and we have to do the login for like 10 script, even if like 10 script or 100 script, and even if that login is gonna take 30 seconds, essentially we are saying that we gonna spend like 100 into 30 seconds only to just get into the login to the application so we can navigate to the particular flow. So Playwright helps there. So those kind of advanced things we will also see within Playwright, but we will go there with framework in place, having implemented page object model and how it will evolve. It's not like something that you have to start away with the single script, because it won't add any difference, right? Because even if you create a storage state, you have to do the one login that can be reused. So we will see all that in the upcoming features, but today for the scope is like very simple OOPS principle, right? So in the last sessions, we talked about TypeScript playground. So I'll just open the TypeScript playground and I'll take an example and we will talk about through that example. Okay, so I hope my screen is visible to you. If it is not, let me know, and I'll try to increase the uh, font size. Right. So generally people talks about, so we will talk about what is object and how how what is something that you should know about the object oriented programming language. So that's the first thing that we will start with, and then other things will fall in place, right? So object is anything that represent the real world, right? And how to think about that as an object, think about that before object there was everything was in procedure or function, that you will write one function for one thing, another function for another thing, and then you will just embed those function one after the another, one after another. We essentially do that, but object is bit different because that way you can spawn multiple object of the same type. So I'm not going into the theoretical discussion, but think about that. Object is something which has attribute and which performs action on itself, right? And people generally starts with the example of a car, which does provide some value, but it's not that useful at all. So what I'll do, I'll take a very real example, and we will try to use that throughout our talk. So I'll start with a class calculator. So So calculator is an object, and if you think about a calculator as an object, there would be like what are the attribute, right? So current value, whenever you turn on the calculator, there would be current value that you will see, which would be by default as an 0, right? So it would be upon type number and it's in 0. So we talked about how to use Playwright and how this type system works, how we define this. So this is again access specifier, not mandatory but good to go like with any class. Chaitali, to answers your questions earlier that we asked, yes, TypeScript support object oriented language, we can use access specifier as well, but it doesn't make sense to use access specifier when we use that as a script, right? And let's say, if you want to store something in the memory, obviously you are using a calculator, so it would be again open type a number, right? And by default it isn't there anything in the number, so let's say it's in 0, right? So this is in calculator. So calculator always have two attributes, some people call it some property. So class will always have some attributes, properties, right? So if you write a page object model, your attributes are generally web elements, the elements that you see on the page, right? And class will always have some methods or functions. Some people call it method, some people call it a function. So properties and attributes. So you can also call this as a data. So these two things are in data, and the other thing is like calculator would have like a method called add number. So let's say number of a type number, right? Number of a type number. And then just like any other method, you will, whatever the current value is your 0, so you will use this dot current value, then plus, or let me make it simple. If someone who has not seen the code, the current value whatever it is that we have set is here, by default it would be 0, and then you will add the value that you wanted to add, which is passed as a parameter, right? So this is just adding your number, but you won't be able to reference this, because just like in Java, just like in other programming language, if it is an objects data, you need to provide this as an keyword to denote that this particular value are referring from the current object itself. So you may create a 10 different calculator class and it may have like a different current value. So if you are referring it, the compiler is supposed to know which value are referring, so it would be current value. So that's about it, right? You have a class, let's say you have another method like get results, right? Get result, and it will return a number. So I'll just like return this dot current value, right? So this is simple class. So class is anything that has data and code. So I'm calling this data and code. We can call these properties or attributes, we can call these functions or methods, right? So this is just in class. Now, so with this class there are 4 pillars, right? So if we go to the VS code, so let me just add like there are 4 pillars of object-oriented language. Object-oriented language, if you know that Alan Key tossed I don't know whether Alan Key termed the tossed, but he has great examples how object should be think about, right? And if you have came from the Java world, there is a great book, Thinking in Java, and they have mentioned like 5 properties of an object. So when open language which support object-oriented so when we will call a particular language as an object oriented, so those things are mentioned in that, and those are like something that you should read if you more intrigued by how to think about the object in a way. But whenever we talk about in academics as well, object orientism, we talk about encapsulation, we talk about anyone want to go? Madhukar, Ritvik, Chaitali. Cool. Anything else? Perfect. Good. So you know everything. I'm sorry. I don't know. Oh, I should cover this or not, because looks like you guys know this. So should I go and detail and explain this, or you think you have good hands on this? If you have good hand on this, I'll just ignore this and we can directly go in and talk about design pattern. Okay. So encapsulation, so I'll talk about the encapsulation first. So encapsulation is like, it comes with an object definition itself, right? So we talked about the object. So keeping all these building blocks, so data and code together is in as in one unit, right? So if we wanted to perform some operation on that object, we will keep this method related to that object in the object itself. So essentially, when you think about any methods that you wanted to write, you always have to think about that this method will change this attribute, right? So essentially all the methods change this data that is present over there. So you change attributes and attributes or properties using those methods, and keeping those together tied in the single unit, logical unit. This is a logical unit for us calculator. It's nothing but an encapsulation. That's it. Like, you are keeping the data and methods that will operate on the same data, right? So okay, you are saying that I'll pass this number from the outside, but to pass that number you have to create an object of a calculator. You will create a calculator object, and then you will say calculator equal to cal equal to new calculator, and then calc add, then pass the number, and then you will get the return. So essentially you are creating an object of this, right? And that's about it. Like, keeping these methods and together is an, like, and outside you get just an interface. To interface is nothing but, so I wrote a good blog on this like 4 or 5 years ago. There might be some video as well that I have done. Interface is like how we interact with something, right? And people, whenever people think about interface, they have like, they have to always think from the concept of Java and programming language. But don't do that, like, because we always interact using an interface when we work with a computer, right? We use either GUI, which is graphical user interface. We use CLI, command line interface, or we use API, application programming interface, right? So interface is how we communicate to other things and talk to it, and they provide us some us and return something, and those are like methods are kind of an interface, right? So even in the Java world, if you have to define interface as an like separate entity, you will just write the method. You don't write anything into, you won't even implement it. You will just define this is how would be the method. This is how I would be talking to the outside world would be talking to me, and I will be responding to them. Okay. Any questions about encapsulation? Okay, cool. uh, okay, I'm taking no as an example. So we talked about encapsulation. We will talk about inheritance. Inheritance is very simple. Like, you will always have like a basic calculator, and then basic calculator does your add, subtraction, right? And then you would want something like an scientific calculator, right? So uh, I'll just write scicalc, and then uh, this calculator will obviously do whatever we expect to base calculator do, like basic calculator do, but we expect it to do more, right? So it can do like a square function. It may have like a square function, right? And it can access the thing which is square का spelling भी miss हो रहा है. Okay, SQARARE, and then I'll implement this, like whatever that we using this current value, we are inheriting this from this base calculator. So the attributes are available to us. This won't be available to us. So this is where the access specifier come into the picture. Private would only be available in this object. If you wanted to have this current value available here, we have to make it protected or public. Public is not recommended, but for inheritance you have to make an protected. So what I'll do, I'll just try to use this dot current value. It won't, because it doesn't supports private. So if I make this protected, let's see, if I get it automatically supported, and you can see now that I made it in protected, I could see my screen is visible, right? You are able to see it properly. Okay, yeah. So now that I made this protected, I was able to, you can see that browser or this intelligence autocomplete, it gave me the value that okay, this is done as right. So if I wanted to do this like in square, inside, I'll just write in another method, and then that's about it, right? And then I don't even have to write get result. I am just inheriting from the above class which is over there, and this is how it would work, right? So if someone wants to use simple calculator or basic calculator, they can still create an object open basic calculator and interact with this method. Someone wants to use scientific calculator, they can use the method in scientific calculator, but they can also use the base calculator, and because it is inheriting the functionality open base calculator when they wanted to interact. So now why use this kind of an example? Because it will give like not like exactly 100% real time modeling of the your problem, but think about this: when you would be creating an object of an base entity or parent entity, and when you would be creating an object of a child entity or the derived entity, right, or inherited entity. So this is like very basic open inheritance. Any questions with inheritance? Okay. So we covered the both thing. The next two, these two things are like very simpler one, and probably this like beforehand, right? The interface one is tricky one, because interface no, not polymorphism is tricky one, because polymorphism is the literally word poly is means many, morphism means shapes, so it can take different shapes. And probably there is very good example of using shape as an object, and then it can square and it can be in triangle when you create, so that can be taken. But for our purpose, I'll use an interface over here, and I'll use try to use the same thing, right? So these are the examples that I have already prepared beforehand, so that we can talk about it in a brief, right? Calculate, so that you will at least get like a concept kind of a thing, right? So you wanted to calculate, and then you will have like two number to calculate. So I am just writing a method which is like one calculate number, and then okay, it is open type number. So this is like an I wrote an interface. Now let's say I have a separate class for an addition. So I am saying ki add calci, and add calci implements my I calculator, right? So now you see this is giving me an underline saying that it is not perfect because it has not implemented the interface. So now I have implemented the interface, obviously because I use the auto interface, it doesn't have the method is not implemented. So if you call this method, it will give you an error, but I'll obviously implement it because I'm doing the addition. I'll write it like return, and for my case, addition case, it would be x plus y, right? And suppose I have like different object altogether, like subtract calc. I'll implement the same thing, I calculator, and I'll get this same error where I can implement it, and here in this case I'll just return x minus y, right? Now you see that both these methods are implementing what I mentioned in the calculator, because we wanted to show that ability of the code to take different forms, polymorphism, multiple forms. So what I am doing right now is like I created interface, I created this. So this both the classes have the same method called the calculator, right? And suppose I am doing something like I am creating a new object. Suppose calci equals to new calculate. I need to create an object of a subtype. So let me say I'm writing in a function which accept two parameters. So function, or so basically I can create an object of any of a type, and I'll just use the calculator. So this is also called as an what I do, I did forgot about it. Mm, does anyone of you recall what the term that we call? I think it's uh, no. It's type overcasting, I guess. Yeah, it's type overcasting. So basically, yeah. So you don't necessarily have to create an object of an subtraction class or addition class. You will create a simple interface object, and then you will pass the number of operation that you will do, right? And then it can be used either for depending upon you have created like add calculation or subtract calculation, it will use that particular call. So maybe this is not like very good example. I'll should be able to find out, but I just wanted to give like it will have the same method, and based on which object you implement it, it will decide whether it has to do the additions or it will have to do the subtraction. So it is called as a type casting. So where you upper cast and below cast, those are two actually things that are there in the programming, and those comes for a polymorphism. These sessions actually it should need like more time. I have prepared for like only 10-15 minutes. I should have like created like very good example instead of this. Anyway, I'll talk about the abstraction is like you use you hide the complexity, you use abstract kind of an classes, abstract kind of an keyword that is provided by the languages. So we talked about calculator as a class here, like in all our examples, right? So if you want to write something for an abstract, so what would be in your class that would be an abstract, right? So I think clearing the something, right? So we talked about like protected current value. So clearing, so if you do some operation and you wanted to clear something from the memory, right? So it, and you created like 10 different types of an calculation method, and you can just use an abstraction that, and that should be it, right? You write something like public clear as a method, and then that method could be an abstract. It could get implemented if you want. You can enforce it in different ways in different programming languages, and that's it, right? You can use that and implement it, extend it in another class, and that would be like able to clear it after you do it. Does this make sense, or should I go and elaborate this may be like I'm like just touching the surface. I can go ahead and dig into this if you want. Should I go ahead and explain this more? Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Thank you. So we talked about like what is what we supposed to talk. We talked about like what is four pillars, uh, and we talked about encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism, and abstractions. There is other few things that we wanted to talk about. Design pattern. So this is where I actually wanted everyone to onto a camera, where I wanted to understand your thought process of what is design pattern to you. How do you see the design pattern? What design patterns do you have used, or something like that? This is very interesting thing, and not 100% most of the people are able to get it, and they may have rated the definition that they have picked up. So I just wanted to have a collaborative discussion and understand your perspective, your take on this before I go into it. Anyone, what is design pattern? Like this is the question that I used to ask in the interview as well. Like if they ask is page object model is a design pattern, then I'll ask what is design pattern. Shaitali, you unmuted yourself, so you can go ahead and answer. Okay, structure, that's correct. Anything else? Ritvik, Madhukar? That's true to some extent, but it's not like an entire definition or like entire how we should perceive things. It's like it's an elephant and we are just touching its feet or ear, and we are calling it some design pattern. Is it a part of an element? Yes. So structure is a part of an element, but it's not an elephant as such. So design pattern is like very simple thing, right? So design pattern is a common solution to the common problem, right? So it's a reusable solution. So that is how you should pursue reusable solution. So think about this. We have been developing software from more than, let's say, 50-60 years, right? So there are some problems which are common. So everyone who is going to develop a program, they will face some kind of problems, and those problems are very common to everyone. So someone has came up after years of an experience to solve those particular type of a problem, which is very common. So when we say that we use page object model, we try to solve one kind of a problem which everyone faces, and obviously we will dig detail about it and talk in, in much length. But these problems are very common, and this is to solve this like very common problem. There are like reusable solutions available in the software development, and those are nothing but a design pattern, right? So why this, these are like reusable. So, and this is even language agnostic. So you can use page object model in Java, you can use in a Python, you can use in a C sharp, you can also use in a TypeScript, right? So think about this. Now page object model is design pattern. It has nothing to do with the any languages, nothing to do with the any technology. It is just like a reusable solution that, this type of problem, use this type of solution, right? It is proven. So if we talk about characteristic like language agnostic, I should integrate it. Okay. Language agnostic, then what I said, tested, right? So a lot of people has used it. We know that it is battle ready, that they said that it is battle tested, right? That's the correct word, that it is battle tested. So people know it work. Then it is scalable because people has worked it like, use it like for like 1,000 test cases, 1,000 scripts, so we know that it works. And then again, it provides a structure like template kind of a thing, that how things supposed to look like, right? So this is what Chaitali was referring, that obviously most of the design pattern you can look at the code, and this is the structure that it has follows. So yeah, so this is what the design pattern is. But that's one thing, like, but these are four things has to be there when we call a design pattern. And obviously not all the design pattern implemented exactly same in different languages. We need to consider the design of the programming languages as well when we use the design pattern, right? So far so good. Any questions regarding this? Okay. So we talked about what is design pattern. Design pattern is like reusable solution to the common problem. These are like battle tested. People have used them for years till like the same kind of a problem. We know it works. It is available in all the programming languages, and it provides some kind of a structure to our code to solve the problem. So those are design pattern. So whenever someone talks about automation or even automation interview, they will talk about page object model, and it's not the only design pattern that is available there or we supposed to use, right? There are like n number of, so I don't know how many of you know G of F or Gangs of Four. So the four people that they wrote the book, like Gangs of Four. So this is like Bible upon writing these design pattern, Gangs of Four, right? So they are like four design patterns element, and these are like, this is like, even if you look at this, like these are like so many design pattern. Again, there are three types. One are like creational, structural, and behavioral design pattern, and how people use it and what kind of problem that it solves, right? So we will see like this kind of problem, and you may not see like page object model over here, because this has been written more from the sense of an actual application development and not from the UI automation development as well, right? And how page object model fit in here, we will talk about that as well. So that is about like design pattern, right? So these are like important thing, may seems like too nuanced to pay attention to, but if you know like what is design pattern, how other design patterns solve some kind of a problem, if you read something like this, the kind of knowledge that you will gain, you will definitely stand out in the interviews with the other candidates, because you know the basic, why are you doing it, why we are calling something, with particular term. It makes a lot of difference. Even all the terms that you recall, you should know the meaning of the each and every term, so that way you enforces you what you know, and it creates like, you would be able to speak with much open conviction. Okay, I think we should move to the next topic instead of spending too much of a time on like no, design pattern. I wanted to talk about page object model. I wanted to know what is your understanding of a page object model, and why don't I open that link and then we will talk about how would you think about page object model for this page, and then we will just talk about like page object model, and then probably we will try to implement it in what problem page object solves. Again, we are diving deep into the page object model because of a time constraint, but there are action pattern. This is something that we implemented with the Java in the earlier framework where we worked together, Chaitali. Action pattern where we used to invoke something with a name that so Anand logged in into the application, so Anand created this, so Anand verified this, so Anand, so where user something like can plays a role. Yeah, it's an action specific, so that is what like an action pattern. We use the action pattern. Then there is a factory pattern that people use, then there is builder patterns that people use. So a lot of these patterns generally get used in our day-to-day code as well. So we have also implemented this again. When you write a software, test automation is again one kind of a software which test another software. So take a minute, think about this. Test automation is a software. So this framework that you write is a software which test another software, right? So you supposed to know, if not as good as like a developer, but you supposed to know good programming, you supposed to have good programming background, because you were writing a program to test another program, right? And why I'm signifying this at this moment in a time, I just wanted to highlight, just because you're using a page object model, that doesn't mean that you are you can use only single design pattern in single project. In single project itself there would be like 10 different possibilities and 10 different problems that you might be facing. We are just going to talk about one problem at this point in a time, but think about that, how you create a data, right? And creating data is not easy. So in that case people would use different kind of a logic to create it, and in that case people tend to use factory, that they don't want it to create an object of it, they will use an like data factory kind of a thing, and this is like very common. So if you have seen framework that you have not designed, you will see like someone has write test data factory, and then there would be static method, and then it will create a valid user, it will create invalid user, and in the test itself they will like test data factory, create valid user, you got the credentials. So that solves like a different problem. Then there would be again this builder pattern or chaining pattern, where you just change everything in the single statement, that you create the page, you log in the page, you verify the page, and you do the assertion, everything in the single line, right? So builder pattern, because it provides more readability kind of a thing. So there are different patterns, and all these patterns are useful. We can use many patterns together to solve the problems that we may face, but like basic problem everyone is going to face when they use the UI application to test, right? And we will talking about now page object model, that is solving one kind of a problem. Now we will talk about page object model. Before after I hear your opinion and your thoughts on this page objects model, so who would like to go first on a page object model? Anyone? Ritvik, you seems to know, so you can go ahead and answer. No, am I putting you on the spot? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so every page one class, right? Okay, so I'll give you one thing. We will talk in this 20 minutes or 30 minutes that's remaining, that will help you in the cracking another interview, that will at least give you like some bonus point while you answer this question in another interview. Every page class have class. Okay, every page has a class has a, right? So the relation that you use like a has a object class where we have an attributes as an elements and then action that you will do. Okay, every page. Now I'll just modifying this every page in the application under test page that you see on the web, and you create an page object, right? Okay, cool. Anyone wants to add anything? Madhukar, Chaitali? Okay, cool. Madhukar is not speaking. I guess he must be in something else. Okay, cool. No worries. I'll answer your question. I'll just wait. I'll now we will think about this page object, and then how would you write a page object model for this class? So we have this, right? This method, this class that we wrote earlier. Okay, this to do. I'll just get rid of this dummy example. We don't need this. Okay, we have this example, so I'll just change this like session 3. Okay, so we have these two tests which was working earlier in the last sessions. We have tested this and other things, and now we are talking about page objects model. So what I'm doing, I'll create a I'll create a new folder over here. I'm calling it as a POM, because now this is another important thing. You don't have to have your test and page objects model together. It's okay. Why? I'll come to that. But let's say that we are designing a login page. Okay. So and you are export class login page. So how you go about writing the page object model? So Ritvik mentioned that you will use username, password and submit, right? So now think about this. Okay, I'll close this. We need this. I'll split it, right? We will need this, but for now I'll just hide it. And we have this, right? So all this is visible, or should I increase the font? Okay, cool. So we have this page, right? So we know that every page object would have a class, have like a page. So we will create a page, right? Here you are, private page of a type page, right? So what is page and how this page is come to? So I'll import the page. So Playwright itself provides us a page interface that we talked about. We talked about like an interface earlier, which is nothing but an implementation of a page, that how would page would behave and what will the page will have, right? So this is page, right? Obviously this page is supposed to be initialized. So just like everything out there in every languages, you will write this dot page equal to whatever the page that you have passed, correct? Now so I just wanted to highlight and come to the thing that I wanted to talk about again with the Ritvik highlighted. So we have like 3 elements, but what are the actions that you're gonna perform on this page? So we talked about earlier when we spoke about the definition of object. So for me as an end user, this is like an action that I'm gonna perform is login, right? And action I may be performing navigating on the this menu, right? Navigating the menu. But again, so you need to have like navigation ka page, and okay, we will come to that. So I'll have this. Now according to the Ritvik definitions, we need to add we need to get at least like these 5 elements, these 3 elements, so 8 elements we need to identify, correct? So I'll just use Playwright's inbuilt thing to Playwright. Oh no, I need to go into this. I need to pick a locator. So new browser has opened up. I'll just copy the URL so that we are doing what we're supposed to be. So we got our first element, right? So our first element is like private. What was it? It was home, right? So home, we can write menu home, right? It's a locator, it's type of a locator, right? So just like we have different locators, Playwright also supports a locator. We have seen this in the brief, but okay, I don't need it. I don't need it like Copilot for knowing importing how to import locators. So you see this locator over here, right? So locator is like the way that you locate a particular element. So if you want a locator type, how would you refer to this dot menu home, and then whatever that locator that I have, how do I get it? I click on this pick locator, I'll get this, and I'll get this, and I'll just use this, and I'm done with like identifying one element and initializing it. That's it. But I'm not gonna go about and do that for every menu. I'll just focus on action that I'll be able to do on the page. So get username and password, and I'm not going to do it like for everything over there. So what I'll do, I'll just create 3 attributes, 3 properties: username, password, submit button. So, and for that we already know the locators because we did this exercise earlier, right? So I just have to use the same thing again. This dot username, this dot password, this dot submit. So because of I'm using Copilot, I don't have to type more. It can read my all the project things and provide me autocorrect. So that way I'm able to type fast and complete things. Obviously you will need the time. So 2 things we need to think about. So actions, what I can do here, I can log in, or I can navigate to practice page, navigate to course page, navigate to home page, navigate to contact page, and all this. So these are the actions. So these would be your methods. So whatever actions you will be able to take, this would be your method, right? So another brownie point that I wanted to talk about when Ritvik said, but now I know I am diverting, but if I go to the courses page, you will see this particular element is present over here as well, right? So should I go ahead and add menu home and like other 5 elements over here in all those pages, because this courses page is also having this contact page is also having this menu? No. So I can create a separate page object for this menu. I can write a method navigate home, navigate practice, navigate courses, navigate blog, and navigate contact. And here I will use a composition that this page also contain this page object model. So the point I am trying to make, that it is not necessarily that every page has only one page object model. No, sorry, only every page has only single class. One page can have multiple class. So basically, even if you use React kind of a framework, you know that page is a composition of different elements, right? And if you inspect this particular page using in Chrome, you will see, okay, this is menu primary item. This is something that they have copied in every page, right? So why you are writing it in every page and you are not copying it in like this in the at one page and using it at like 10 different pages? They have not written like same thing again and again. So we have to follow the like very similar thing. We don't have to do that in exactly same way, right? So I'll just close this and I'll write a method. Now I wanted to just highlight one more thing that people tend to do differently. It's not entirely wrong, but it doesn't give the abstraction, right? So page is like page object model supposed to provide an interface for a page. So when I say the interface is an action that you do the page and then page provide you the response. So you do this action is like you do action async login, right? And then you provide an user detail, right? So we have created this interfaces and credentials, right? So I'll just use credentials. I'll see. Okay, this is not gonna work because this is not exported. So for now I'll just write as an export over here, and I should be able to get like, okay, first I need to complete the method. Async का spelling गलत है, async, and okay, because read id type. Okay, I need to import this as well, so I'll just write import credentials from interface. Credentials की ज़रूरत नहीं है, I am writing it in the test page. So what I'll do now, instead of writing it over somewhere, I'll create a page, right? I'll create a page folder basically called as a type. And why this session is important, because this is how you will see that how framework will evolve, right? So I'll just create an like an interface as an like interfaces as a file, interfaces dot ts, and I'll just copy this interfaces in this, and I'll say the export interface. Okay, now I'll get like import, and I can use the same thing in the import. Credentials, which credentials it is referring? Yeah, it will sooner if I use it. Let me use credentials instead of user. Okay, and now what I need to do, I just need to do like this, creates. Why I'm using type? Okay, I am this shouldn't be the case anyway. I'll write it over here, import credentials. Okay, the yes was missing. So if you have not noticed, in earlier code yes was missing, and that is why it was not able to recognize it. Creates. Maybe I should have the interface में कुछ गलती. Credentials नहीं, single है, तो I just need to write one. It's not an array, so I'll just write type as a credential, type as a credential, and why it is giving me an error now? Username. Okay, this has something with inbuilt keyword, so I'll just user details. I'll change this and it should work, because the credential is something as like an internal thing that they are referring, and that is why it's not able to figure it out, and it's taking so much time for no reason. So let me do that. So we have like our test ready. Now think about this. In Java world also, people do like they send users first name or users username, then password, again some other parameters that should be passed as a single object. And even if you want to pass as a different parameter, that's okay too. But the standard coding practices or clean coding practices, if you know about the clean coding, it's a book written by the they call him Uncle Bob. So this is Uncle Bob, and he wrote as a clean code book. So you supposed to have as less parameter to the method as possible. At most 2 or 3, not more than that. If your method has more than 3 parameters, then in some way it needs to be refactored. So it is a kind of a clean coding practice. Obviously you can't enforce them 100% of the time. It's just a guideline, but you supposed to recall that whenever possible, try to pass the single object or 2 object as a parameter and not many. So you do this. So people tend to do like they when they write a page object model. So suppose we wanted to do this now, what we will do, we don't have to, okay, we don't need all these things, last one, these things, wait, we just have to create like a login page. So I'll just like constant login page, and I'll write new login page with a page, and then I'll write login page login with valid user. Obviously I need to import this as well. To import this, because just because I wanted to import this is why I have added export to this class. You will only be able to do that if you add an export. So now the same test that we have written, you can see that we wrote it like in only 2 lines. Obviously there were already 3 lines, you see 3 lines, but this should be different. And why it is useful, we will talk, but let's let it run and let's see whether it is working as expected or not. Whether it should be, it's not like rocket science or such, but as you can see, this has worked. It has passed positive login test. Now think about this, if we don't do this, what we have done, right? So I'll just okay, I'll write that. Suppose now you do this login in 100 different files. In every flow is gonna change within login, and suppose this particular element changes, you will have to make the changes at 100 different places, right? But if you use the login page, it would have been very easy. You will make the changes at one places because your code would be the same. And this is where this object oriented principles that we talked about will come into the picture, right? We are using an object which provides us an abstraction, which just gives us an interface to interact with the page without knowing the internals. We don't need to know how it performs the login operation. We don't know, when we are in the test, we don't need to know what are the elements used, right? So this is another assignment that I give to someone, to write a page object model and test as well. 2 things I ask them, I see whether they have added the assertion. So we talked about arrange, action and assert. If they have not added assertion and they are writing if and else in the code, in their test, ye hai to pass hai. If this is the case, then this pass, otherwise is fail, then that's not a test. Test has an assert in that. That's it. That's first thing. Second thing, I check whether their test has any element in it. So these tests are not recommended, these are fragile, these are hard to maintain, and this is the problem that page object model solves, nothing else. Page object model are like single, and we will obviously, I wanted to talk about like what all the things that we have learned, like object oriented principles along with like inheritance and encapsulation. We will talk about that as well, but page object model is just like this, that's it. You don't need to like pass 2 different methods. You will just create a single object and you will pass it. You don't have to make changes in here. If something changes, you will just change one thing and everything should be maintainable. So that's it. Page object model is, that's it, nothing more than that, right? It's very simple. It's like simplest thing that you will be able to see. So what are the advantages that you think of the page object model? Now we talked about it, we saw like very high level structure. I know these are like, this might be the entry level thing that you might have seen, and everyone talks about login because it's the simplest thing. All the no code tools you will see, they will always cover login flow because it is the simplest thing to do in the automation. So what we will do, we will pick some application, we will deploy that locally. We will try to see if we can deploy that on AWS, some AWS EC2 instance which is free to available, and then we will try to test it on the both, and we will try to write a framework from that application perspective. Now that we know like most of the things, what is the page object model, what are the basic features of the Playwright, how the TypeScript system works. So if we know that, then we will start building that, and we will do that in the next session. So that's the objective, right? Like taking you up there and then building the things over there, and like evolving thing from scratch, like writing 0 line to like writing a full-fledged framework, having like at least 10 to 12 script, and how to optimize it, how to use like best of the Playwright features, like a fixture that we haven't touched or talked about. So all those things we will go into the deep. But before that, I just wanted to conclude with a page object model. So I just wanted to know what is your uh, understanding of a page object model now. What are the advantages that you can think about the page object model? And I'll be very happy, if you come on a cam, because yeah, we are done with the coding part, most of it. We will just talk about like things and we will call it off, because the other things that we need to cover are like uh, are too big. Like we have implemented POM on a superficial level, but that's good for today. We will go into the deep and do things. I just wanted to highlight, because we talked about this create page object. We mentioned that in one single application there would be like, you may have like 10 different page objects model. There is a no sense as well to create one-to-one mapping. So that's one thing that I asked Ritvik to answer smartly in the interview, so it will help him. We will just talk about advantages, and obviously everything has a drawbacks, and we will touch base on this advantages, drawbacks, and then we can call it off for the day. So what are the advantages? I'll stop sharing the screen, and I would be happy if you folks can come on the screen if possible. Thank you for being on camera, Chaitali. I appreciate it. Ritvik. Okay. No one is interested. Okay, that's also all right. But at least, what are the advantages that you think of the page object model now that we scratch the surface? And obviously, I know that Ritvik and Madhukar has used it in the past, so as a Poonam. So at least we can just collaborate and come up with the list of the advantages that we know of. If you like, I can write it down in the group. Hey Ritvik. Thank you. Hi. Okay. Good to see you all. Yeah. So any advantage? So first thing that we talked about, like reusability of a code, right? That we would be able to reuse the same login code at 10 different places. Then maintainability. What else? Yes, easy for debugging. And then think about this. Our method was now like 3 lines, but if you write an object and you write a method, your 100 lines open code or your 20 lines open code can reduce to just like a 2-3 lines, right? So there is we talked about Uncle Bob's book, right? Clean coding, and there is another concept in that is a code smell, and you should know these terms like code smell. So if something is too big, it would be very hard to debug as well. So debugging is not different just because having an object, but having small pieces of code in place. The reason being, if you have like 30 different methods and like 500 lines long class, and you are debugging through one method to another method, you won't be able to keep the context of everything that is going in your class, and it would be very hard. What is that is actually failing, and what I pass to which method, right? So you need to have like code very small and intact, and obviously there is solid principle as well, right? So I don't know how many of you know, there is solid and there is KISS, keep it simple silly. Solid like single responsibility, then interface, and all those like Mashow's principle, and obviously you would have heard about it. I don't know whether you went into deep or not, but every class supposed to do the single thing, every method supposed to do the single thing, kind of a thing, right? So having those in place, it will you improve your readability and thus the debugging. It's not just directly get rid of a debugging, but if you think about it, it will make it easy to read your code. Like okay, I'm not sharing my screen, so I'll go back to sharing the screen for like few seconds, and then probably so we had like this 3 line open code over here, but you still need to read like, okay, I have used the selector of a type of label, and I'm filling this whatever I have provided, valid username, but it would have been more easier, right? So now, as in, once I know how to read an object oriented language, it would be so much easier for me to read the code, like login page. Okay, टाइपिंग का हो गया. So it would be too much easier for me to do this. And now I'm saying too much easier because I know it's very simple and very superficial example, but you don't even gonna invoke. Whenever we create the framework, you don't even create the object in your test method. It will get created automatically and you will be just using this a single line. You maybe add this as like an before you may add this is like an before test or before each wala thing, and then it is done kind of a thing, right? So yeah, that's it. Then what about it, right? You won't even need like login over here. Okay, I need to make a login as in something which is accessible to everything in the page. So I'll just try to login over here, which is of type a login, and then I'll say late because we are assigning it, and then we'll try to use this. Okay, it won't work because we have not added a scope. So far we are writing everything as an individual scope. Let's go and write it as a suite. So that is something that I intend to cover later, but now that yes, it's not an annotation, it's an hook. So there are different hooks available that we can use in the Playwright. So it's one of the hook. So annotation is something different and it is available in the Playwright, but what you are saying it's in like now it should be like auto smart में आना चाहिए before Playwright करेगा ना look. Yes, right. Before all hook in Playwright. Yes, that's correct. It's very similar to like test-ng annotation. As I said, before. So there is like this test hooks available. Test dot before all. So these are called hooks, as I said, right? So you write a test before all, and then you can say that it is an async and all those things, right? Async and this. And I'll just copy it, and I don't even create the page here. So this is a fixture. I don't even create a page, and page is available to me. And now I create this. I created this like, let me add as an like an class thing. Let me be, and then I'm login page. I'll just do the initialization was somewhere there, right? We new login का कुछ तो code डाला था हमने, but we will write it over here. Thank you, autopilot. Okay. We will see how to fix it, but idea is like, you know, you will create an object once and you will use that object over and over again. And other thing is like कहाँ से ले रहा है फिर? Okay, let me figure it out, otherwise I won't feel. Okay, yeah. So you will initialize in the test, or you will again use a fixture open page right away, that instead of writing this page you will get the login page out of the box and you will use that. So that can also happen. So your code complexity, you know, it improves dramatically. So these are like few benefits of a page object model that are helpful for us. There are certain disadvantages, right? And the same thing that you might have seen, it doesn't make sense to write a page object model for a single page or an application of a login page. If you have only 2 pages or 3 pages, don't write page object models. It is no useful, right? Page object model should be written if there are like enterprise application, there are 100 different screen and you are interacting with like 10 different screen in the flow, then only write a page object model. If you have a single page like a login, you're writing a page object model, how was it making a sense? Like 3 element instead of 3 line, I am writing a whole class and calling an object. I know it goods to show that, but it doesn't make sense. So if you want to really cover that, then think about it. If it has to be like very big project and useful, otherwise the 3 line that I'm getting by recording the thing, I'm spending like an half an hour to create the object model which I'm getting out of the box with a recording. So it's not solving any problem as such. You are writing all the text in a single file. You can just use request and search and replace, and it will work eventually. So that's the one thing that people not talk about, like, okay, why to use it, like. And obviously it requires good planning. So planning, like Ritvik said, we create a page object model, but we need to think about when multiple people thinking, how we gonna approach this page, how many components that visible in the page, and how many times we gonna break it, and how these components are gonna talk to each other, because each component for us is a page object model, right? So those things needs to be planned, and it needs bit kind of a planning, especially when listing is there. You get some data in the listing, then you pass the data, then out of that data you identify the object, then that object is opened, something that we tried out in the earlier framework, if you recall, Chaitali. That, with listing we create another object. So I know past references people may not know, but some of us used to work together like 5-7 years back, and we worked on the same project, so the references are common. So that's like pretty much about the page object model. It's a design pattern specially used for maintainability, scalability of an application, scalability in terms of a number of scripts that you wanted to write and maintain those at that scale. I personally worked in the project when we had like around 1200 script, 12,000 test cases automated, and we had around at least 700-800 page objects models we have written, and we had like 24 VM working. We had dedicated COE who was working on automation fun days, and the challenges that we had was like very different than what I faced when I started with the Selenium. So obviously that kind of learning, it's very hard to get from the session outside, but you'll really learn a lot on those kind of projects. Okay, I don't have anything else. If you have any questions, we can take those. Otherwise, we can call it off.